This next game was, like light years from being perfect. But I think it still illustrates something, at least some point, namely that even a beginner will know the first 5, 6, or 7 moves in an opening, in a well-known opening. And then when the opening is, when you finish the opening phase, so to speak, then you have to start thinking by yourself, and that's usually where things become a lot more complicated. So an opening is obviously more than just memorizing moves. You also have to understand the opening. So this game I was black, and the time control was 4 minutes with 1 second on each move, and it was a silly in defense. There's nothing to say about these moves. I suppose the only thing one can talk about after bishop g5 is the move that I played, e5. I believe the most common move here is e6, so e5 is probably not the best. And because of e5, my opponent played knight f5. I took the knight, and this was of course a bliss game, but I think the most common move here is bishop e6. And the point is that, black wants to avoid any knight d5 ideas, because, the knight on f6 is pinned. But that's easily solved. I mean, I just took the knight. I'm not saying that it's the best move, but that's what I played. E takes f5, knight b d7. And by the way, there is no knight d5 anywhere. For example, here, I can just play queen a5, and the knight just has to go back. Bishop c4, bishop e7, and again there is no knight d5 because I can just take, and then the bishop is hanging on g5. But he could play something like bishop takes, and when I take with the knight, then he puts his knight on d5, perhaps, if he's very eager to trade pieces here. But then I would again take, and he would probably play something like bishop takes, queen c7, castles, or whatever, and my bishop on e7 is protecting my pawn on d6. But then, of course, I could play something like f4 in the near future or something. I don't know. Okay, queen e2. So obviously he's preparing some sort of castles long here, and I castle short, and here he did castle long. I played queen a5. He played g4, perhaps f4 was also a move, but then I would just leave things as they are, and if he takes, I would just take with my other knight. And okay, this pawn on d6 would perhaps be a little bit weak. I could of course take with the pawn too. I don't know. He played g4, hoping to start some sort of kingside attack. I played b5, bishop b3, rook c8. It looks like white has something going on my kingside, but I really don't think there's much to worry about. He played f4, I played b4. He played knight to a4. Perhaps he could have played knight e5. I don't know, if knight d5, and if I take with my knight, he would obviously take with the rook, and the rook, by the way, would be protected by the bishop here on b3. So I would probably have to go to e7 here, and by the way, his bishop is now protected by the pawn on f4. But that didn't happen. He played knight to a4, which is obviously a bad move. Well, at least not as good as knight e5. I play rook e8 just to protect my bishop on e7, and perhaps when the bishop moves, or if he starts trading off, I always have this rook file. He played f takes e5. I play knight takes e5. Maybe pawn takes was also possible, but now I still keep this rook file open, as well as attacking this pawn on g4. So he played bishop takes, and now rook d5. So temporarily it doesn't work. I mean, I don't have any discoveries here from my rook, obviously, because he's threatening my queen, so I have to move to just any square, queen c7. And here he made a huge blunder. He played rook e1, and here knight d3 check, opening up another discovery on his rook here. Not really his queen, because he can just take here, but he loses the exchange. So he has to take, and he played queen d3, queen takes d3, and now took the rook. Rook e1 check, king d2, queen e7. Here he obviously saw that I have well, a very nasty threat to play bishop g5, and there's really nothing he can do about it. So he played c4 just to get it, give his king a square. And if I would take something like en passant, he could take perhaps with the knight. I'm not sure. I suppose white is completely lost here. So I played bishop g5 check, and now the king c2 the only move, because what else is there? There is no other move. He can't go down here anywhere, and he can't go to c3, so the only move is king to c2, and that's also what he played, and now just rook c1 checkmate. So the game was over in 23 moves. Ridiculous game. I'm not proud of it or anything, but it does illustrate something, namely that obviously he knew the opening at least a little bit, and this was a blitz game, but you don't lose in 23 moves like that if you've been around for a while, so to speak. So I suppose this whole line started with e5, and even though it's a book move, but I think a better move would be simply to play e6, and we would have a standard Najdorf, I suppose. So anyway, that's what happened. I took the knight, and there was never a chance for him to play knight e5, obviously, because of what I already said. I had queen a5, and the knight has to go back, and then I could even play something like knight to e4, and he would probably have to play bishop back to d2, and so on and so forth. So I think black is just fine here. Would I recommend bishop takes f5? Well, I don't see why not. I mean, this was a blitz game, and perhaps next game I would probably play e6. But when you always play the same moves, you get bored. So I think it's interesting after e5 to play just takes over here. And by the way, one last thing. E5 is also often played, let's say, if bishop e3, here black can play e5, and now obviously if knight to f5, we can play d5, and white is in, well, I suppose in big trouble here, because well, I'm threatening to play this move d4, and he can't go here obviously because I will again play d4. So he will probably have to move something, either the bishop or the knight, and then perhaps black could win something, at least in a blitz game. So anyway, so if not bishop e3, then e5, and this is the right move. But here after bishop g5, e5 is not the most common move. Again, it's e6. So that's about it. I just wanted to share this rather, I don't know, funny game. I'll see you soon.